everybody. I'm Jessica with BCID.
And I am Jose Hernandez with United Spinal Association. Today we have a great advocate and someone that I've worked with many, many times in the past, whether it be fighting for our rights or advocating on the front lines by doing some civil disobedience demonstrations to make sure that our civil liberties stay intact. Before I introduce him completely, we're going to go over some house rules. Jessica?
Yep, and Happy New Year, by the way. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put it in the Q&A section or in the chat box. And we'll, I don't know, depending on how Gregg wants to do it, we can either do it at the end or answer as we go. We have our lovely ASL interpreter here, Mary. Hi, Mary. If you just want to see her, you can go ahead and right-click on her image and you can pin her. And also in the chat box is a link to Otter AI, right?
Actually, I didn't put the link in because closed captioning services are fully integrated now. So you can click on the closed captioning button down at the bottom of the toolbar. So now, without further ado, Gregg, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your advocacy efforts.
I don't know. I was hoping you would do that. I hate talking about myself in that sense. It's Gregg Baratan. I'm the director of advocacy at the Center for Disability Rights. I'm also one of the co-founders of Crip the Vote. I don't know what else to say. I took a bit of a strange path to disability advocacy. I spent about 15 years running from a disabled identity, trying to pretend it didn't exist, and then I guess the rest of my life has been embracing it, and that's been so much better. It was painful, exhausting, trying to hide from who I was, and finding the disability community has been the best thing that has happened to me. So added so many wonderful moments to my life. So I guess that's who I am. Sure.
Can I interrupt? Since you mentioned crypto vote, would you mind if we play the video for that?
No, I don't mind at all. I'm fully expecting Crip the Vote to be the first line of my obituary. So
I happened to pull it up and I've watched it and it's a great video.
Sure.
So if you allow me, I am going to put that up right now.
Just because I'm disabled doesn't mean I'm invisible.
Just because my disability is invisible
doesn't mean I'm not disabled.
Just because I'm physically disabled doesn't mean I can't dance.
Just because I have a physical disability doesn't mean I can't play sports.
Just because I can't walk, it doesn't mean I can't move forward.
Did you know that people with disabilities are the largest minority group in America?
That is, if we were recognized as a minority group.
Did you know the unemployment rate for disabled people is more than double of that of non-disabled people?
And that 4 out of 5 disabled people are unemployed?
Or that disabled workers earn 30 to 40% less than non-disabled workers?
And that it is legal to pay disabled workers less than minimum wage?
Or that people with disabilities are 3 times more likely to live in poverty?
Or that 40% of homeless people are disabled?
Did you know that if I make more than $2,000 a year at my job, I could lose the Medicaid benefits I need to be independent?
Or if I fall in love and get married, I could lose my disability benefits as well.
Did you know that disabled people are the only minority group who can be legally segregated?
Both at work
and at school.
Or that long lines and lack of accessibility keep a lot of disabled people from voting?
Did you know that half of the people killed by the police have a mental health disability?
or that veterans with invisible disabilities are often misdiagnosed by government doctors who don't have the time or resources for them.
I am a part of my community.
My community.
My community.
I may need help getting dressed, but I can still live on my own, in my own home.
Just because children with disabilities learn differently doesn't mean that they need separate classes in school.
I may be disabled, but I add tremendous value to my employer.
All we want.
All we want.
All we want.
All we want.
Is an opportunity.
An opportunity.
An opportunity.
An opportunity.
For our voices.
Our voices.
Our voices.
Our voices.
To be heard.
I'd actually forgotten that Jess was in there.
I'm gonna say, can I point out the actual star of that video? My child. I'm kidding.
It's absolutely a great video. So I know, great segue into advocacy itself.
Yeah, I mean, Crip the Vote has been an amazing ride. We started in 2016, just out of frustration because we saw all these debates with candidates and no one was talking about our community, even when they were talking about our community. You know, they'd be talking about issues like Medicaid and they'd never mention disabled people. And so a few of us, Alice Wong, Andrew Polrang, and myself, got together and decided to start a campaign. And we were expecting something small, I think. We were expecting to live tweet debates, maybe have a couple Twitter chats. And the amazing thing about the disability community is people just took it over. They took ownership of the hashtag and began having conversations about policy issues, began tweeting at politicians, tweeting at media to try and get stories in. And it, you know, within weeks, people were on the hashtag 24/7, to the point where, you know, this past year during the presidential cycle, we hosted our first chats with leading presidential candidates. We had a chat with Elizabeth Warren and a chat with Pete Buttigieg. There was another chat that used the hashtag with Julian Castro. And I think because of that, and because the community has been so active and so engaged on the hashtag, we've seen politicians up their game. We've seen them, you know, release policy pages and policy positions that are far more detailed than we ever got in the past, to the point where, you know, you look at Joe Biden's policy, and it in previous years would have been taken by the community as the most fantastic thing. By the time it came out, we had seen so much better that we were not necessarily satisfied with it. I mean, it's very good policy, and I hope he sticks to it and carries it forward, but people weren't satisfied with it when it came out because everyone else had been forced to up their game and produce much more detailed policies. So I mean, it's been a wonderful ride to see what's happened with Crip the Vote. And while, you know, Alice and Andrew and I have done lots of work on it, the real star of the show has been our community. So that's been wonderful. So thanks for telling people about it. And I mean, I was thinking about this in relation to the title you put on the session today, and why is disability rights advocacy important in 2021? Or I don't know the exact wording you used. I think we saw some of that yesterday. We saw, you know, that democracy is under attack, that there are a small group of people that are going to work like hell to put their interests ahead of everyone else's. And to counter that, we need to be active. We need to participate. And whether that's going on Twitter and you know, raising the discussions that we need to have, or whether that's going to the state capitol or going down to City Hall and talking about whatever issues are important in your local area, that has never been more important. I mean, we've seen so many challenges to not only our community, but the broader community as well. You know, in 2017, we had healthcare threatened. Disabled people showed up for that, and we led the fight against repeal and replace to preserve what we had. But there's so much more to do, and there's so many more attacks. And not only, I want to caution people not to take a partisan approach. It's very easy to buy into partisan politics here. It's not all Republicans attacking us and Democrats defending us. There was a bill in 2018, might have been 2017. No, it was 2018. HR 620 that went through the House of Representatives, and you know, a bunch of us were arrested trying to stop it. But if you look, this was a bill that would have required notifications on the ADA and required us to wait even longer to get remedies to violations of the ADA.
I want to add a little more background about HR 620.
Sure.
So basically, it would have made the process a lot longer in filing a complaint against a business that had already violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. You know, it was signed 30 years ago, and now they would have had 30 years plus 120 days before you can file a complaint, and give them another 60 days to answer that complaint. You know,
yep.
We actually went to one of our local representatives' offices and actually staged a civil disobedience event at her office because she voted or was going to vote for the bill. Actually, she did.
She had been signed on to it, yeah, I remember,
Yeah.
as a sponsor. But these were, you know, this was supported by at least 12 Democrats. It was supported by more Republicans, but it wasn't really partisan lines that carried it. We had Republicans that voted against it, and Democrats that voted for it. And I think, you know, what I tend to tell people is we need to be more partisan to the community and less partisan to, you know, the political parties. Political parties are only out for their own power. They are more concerned with maintaining power and their control over whatever legislation comes out of their body than they are with what our community wants. And so we need to think more strategically. I'm not saying that means don't vote for one party or the other, but you need to hold people accountable and make sure that they understand your issues and the issues that are important to you.
I'm gonna agree with you to a certain degree. I would hope that people who get into politics come in for the right reasons. You know, they want to make effective change in their neighborhoods, and they rise the ranks that way. Case in point, Richie Torres, that was just elected to actually my congressional district.
But
I'm not going to say.
There's some wonderful politicians, and we've worked closely with many of them. I'm not trying to slander all politicians, because I mean, I was saying to you before, we a health chair, for example, in New York, Gustavo Rivera in the Senate, who has done wonderful things to support our community, actually voted against his own party's budget last year because he didn't like the changes they were trying to make to the consumer directed program, among other things. And so, there are wonderful politicians out there, and I wouldn't want to smear them. I think the party structure tends to lend itself more to the power mongering that I'm talking about than individual politicians. But I think I think it's something to be wary of, and I think we need to think more in terms of what policies we want, need, and support, and to go out and advocate for them as strongly as possible in multiple ways, whether it's through the political system and working your legislators, whether it's through direct action, or whether it's through organizing grassroots efforts to show support for those issues. I think we need to be focused on issues as much as, if not more than, the personalities we see in the political ring.
So we have a couple of questions from Carol, actually.
Sure.
Do you want to share, read those out, Jessica, or?
I can try. The birds are going off. Does it sound too bad?
No.
Okay. So advocacy is carried out in a variety of ways. I'm wondering if Gregg would like to share his favorite example of in-person advocacy and his favorite example of remote virtual advocacy.
Remote, I can point to all of Crip the Vote. That's been an amazing experience for me to see people and to participate in the fact, people connecting with the political sphere, having politicians connect with us, reach out to our community to find out where we stand on particular issues has been amazing to see. And in that sense, it's hard to pick out one moment. In terms of the in-person stuff, also hard to say. The first adapt action I led was on HR 620. We took over a rules committee hearing right before the final vote in the House, and then the 3 days later, fortunately, they didn't give us the kind of penalties we paid in release. It was pay and release, so we were able to do another action that week. So we went into the House gallery and started chanting just before they were ready to vote, and disrupted the vote. And I had mixed feelings about it, but in one sense, because the vote passed in the House. But on the other hand, we were told by many in the Senate that was the reason they prevented it from moving further beyond that House vote. And that was a nice thing to hear. So being a part of that was a wonderful moment. Seeing
not only that, you guys made the national news with Rachel Maddow.
Oh, that was for the healthcare fight. That was also something that I'm incredibly proud of. We took over Mitch McConnell's office at the beginning of the healthcare fight, just as the first version of repeal and replace was introduced, and that sort of sparked what we like to call the Summer of Adapt, where Adapt ran. And I need to say I'm no longer a part of Adapt, but I will always be proud of this work. We during the Summer of Adapt, we led, I think on average, 3 actions a day across 30 states for a period of 3 months, which I don't know of any action that's been sustained on that level for that long anywhere. It was an amazing thing to be part of. We didn't even know things were going to be popping up, and suddenly we hear there's an action in Wisconsin, or there's an action going on in Michigan or Kansas right now, and it was an amazing thing to be a part of. So that was fantastic, and the attention from people like Rachel Maddow helped carry that much further, which was nice to see, because generally the joke was that ADAPT could shut down all of Washington, D.C. and not get any coverage. I think we benefited from one coincidence with the McConnell action, that his office happened to be right down the hall from the press office in the building, and so they couldn't help but hear us. So cameras were out there by the time we started chanting, and that was a wonderful experience, to see people support our community and to realize that healthcare mattered to people that they cared about, that mattered to all of us, and we started to see a change in the discussion about what Medicaid was, about what healthcare did, and I think that's when it started to become more of an issue in political campaigns, because people could understand where healthcare affected them more, because of the discussions we had during that period.
So there's a couple more questions, and Carol has quite a few. She says, sometimes non-disabled people non-disabled people use disabled people as props when doing their own advocacy. How do we ensure that we are the narrators of our own stories when we advocate?
I think that's really difficult. I think we've seen that happen so many times. After the 2017 healthcare fight, we'd get calls and ADAPT, can you come fight with us on this? And it was clearly people wanting to have that image of disabled people in their fight. But it wasn't something where they'd necessarily involved us from the beginning or been supportive of ADAPT's issues. They just wanted that power lent to their fight. And there are times when the cause they were supporting outweighed any objections we might have had. But I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. Are you being used, or is this something where you're an active partner in this fight? And I don't think you can weigh that wholly on the cause, because if a cause is willing to use disabled people as props, then chances are when if they win or on their issue, they're going to forget about disabled people come time to negotiate that victory. And so I think it's a difficult line to tread.
So here's another one from Katie. Do you feel like you are always on as an advocate, or do you consciously choose to advocate or not advocate in different situations? This is a good question actually for Jessica.
Yeah, I mean, please, I struggle with this because the politics are personal. You can't get away from that, and it's part of identity. So to an extent, yeah, I do always feel on. But that said, there are times when you want to sort of find your own space to be you. I don't know.
But I think the struggle is, how do you choose which ones that you want to fight and make any progress in. So are you going to take on this large advocacy effort on your own? You know, the elevator's broke. You're not going to fix it for everyone. So yeah, I think I feel I struggle with that sometimes as well. It's like, how do you pick and choose? Jessica, I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
I mean, I always tell people my whole life. I mean, like, I've been an advocate my whole life, you know, whether I chose to be or not. It's kind of just what I do. You know, my mom has CP and she has spastic triplegia. And so, you know, there's challenges there. And I have a disability, so does my brother. So it's always been a challenge. And now working for PCID is a whole other level now of advocacy. So I would say that I definitely have a turn off button because I do get exhausted. Never from my mother though. My on button is always on from my mom. I'll go to war for her any day of the week. But I do have like my lines that I've had to like draw and kind of take a break from it because it's very consuming, like exhausting almost sometimes.
I mean, can I ask, do you think, because I've seen this within the community, people struggle with this notion of self-care, and I think it's such an important part of doing advocacy work, because if you can't care for yourself, you can't take time to protect yourself, you're not going to be a very effective advocate. And I'm wondering how you negotiate that in terms of where you draw that line, when you feel you have to, when you feel, okay, this isn't ideal, but I need to move forward.
Well, it's kind of like Jose says with that choosing bit. That's like the part that I guess I'm learning, because I'm a very headstrong girl. And I'm learning to access my turn off button and kind of just say, like he said, okay, I can't fix this elevator for everybody right now in this second. I need to take a breath from that and kind of just move on to the next thing. And I'll put it off like till the next day, so to speak, kind of thing. But it is true, like, because like for my mom, I can't like 24/7, it's always on. But I do, you know, in other ways, kind of just say, okay, I have to take care of myself, my mental health. You know, this year has been trying for everybody, and I'm kind of just mentally and physically exhausted at this point. But I'm learning to access that. Okay, right now, I'm going to take a breath and take this time for myself.
You know, I want to shoot into a different topic, more into the advocacy of things, side of things. But
Wait, before you do that, somebody made a comment. Do you want to share that?
Yeah.
Darren Bates' comment is get involved, because when people with disabilities are integrated into public policy, we help ensure disabled people influence the priorities and strategies of the public sector and make nothing about us without us actualized in practice.
So I wanna maybe take the last, 30, 40 minutes of this and say, how did you get into advocacy? Like your first real like political advocacy, not, fighting for your supplies, because we do that on a daily basis and it's something that we have to do. And why is it important for the disabled community to continue to grow its advocacy base?
You know, I want to answer that really quickly if I can, because it's not too much. But like, I always have a hard time getting people to like put on their, war boots, so to speak, and kind of like get out and be the voice. You know, like when we go to Albany and stuff, and getting people to come and see the importance of being the face and, instead of a number to people. So what would you say to like everybody to encourage them to take on advocacy, and learn more about it, because it does affect us?
I'm not sure where to start, but I mean, with me personally, I started in I was in grad school in the UK. I lived in London for about 15 years. and they have a very strong student politics there. They call them student unions, and they are very active politically. Usually people there use that as I guess, a launching point into general politics or organizing, depending on their approach. And so I think I got started there in student union politics, trying to improve things for other students, trying to work on some political issues while I was there. And then, you know, as I embraced my disabled identity more and more, that activism, that advocacy became more focused on disability and disability politics, and it was sort of a slow progression for me. Going to Jessica's question and your second question, the reason to get involved, and it's hard work getting involved. First of all, I should say it's not easy, but there's so many forces out in our world trying to convince people that there's no point to it, and quite frankly, if there's even a reason, that's a good reason to start, because there's always a point. People's lives are being affected by policy every day, whether it's snow removal here in Rochester that's keeping people from accessing the transportation system, or if it's, you know, a straw ban that means someone who needs a straw to access their local cafe can't get, you know, the straw they need to use it, or being told that they need to bring it themselves because, you know, there's no extra cost to being disabled, and in this world, and so there's so many political reasons, and you need to decide for yourself what matters to you, because for some people it's going to be the fight for attendant care. You know, for some people the biggest threat to their ability to access the community is racism, and so if you're not willing to, you know, stand up and fight that, I mean, go out and fight that, and that is an access issue. And I think we need to rethink our understanding of advocacy in many ways, because to an extent it's been dominated by this notion of disability rights. And disability rights are useful and important, and I've worked in disability rights for a number of years. But I think we need something more, and I think, you know, it's out there. We've seen it. It's the words for it have been given to us by a group called Sins Invalid, which is a wonderful organization in California, and they talk about disability justice, and they've identified principles of disability justice. The first of which I think is probably the most important, which is the notion that oppression is intersectional. That our experience of oppression, whether it's ableism, racism, or sexism, homophobia, all of these things are not isolated from one another. You cannot, for many people, you cannot find a distinction between your experience of racism and your experience of ableism. If you dealt with special education in the past, if you've been in the special education system, that whole system came up because of the ways ableism and racism work together. There's no coincidence that the special education system was created just as the courts were getting fed up with schools for not integrating fast enough under the Brown versus Board of Education ruling. And so, you know, as the second wave of Brown versus Board of Education cases came in, and the courts are saying, you're not doing this, you're not moving fast enough, the school system started finding other ways to segregate. And they used ableism by saying, oh, we're creating special education system to help disabled kids. But throughout that process, they were over-identifying Black, brown kids and shuffling them off to this system where they got this limited education that was still segregated and still denied them future opportunities. So as long as we're seeing ableism, racism, sexism, all these things as discrete oppressions, as wholly singular things, we're not going to address the real problems. And one of the things disability justice allows us to do is focus on the way they interact.
I want to add to that, because it's not only everything that you said there, but it's also just not being knowledgeable. When I have gone to Washington, D.C., which was one of the most powerful things I've done, I've been to D.C. many, many times over the years, and the first time I went, I practically cried because, here I am, a poor Puerto Rican from the Bronx, and I'm here in Washington, D.C., not only representing for myself, but, people with disabilities across the nation. But one thing in common came was that not all politicians know anything about disability. You're teaching them. They're like, oh, I never thought about that. And one reason I say this is because we don't vote and we don't really advocate. We don't have our strong voice. It's like the LGBT community, they all banded together and they got things done and they were heard. And they're a large voting bloc. We need to get involved in, even if we don't completely, it's not our issue, we should all support each other in this issue.
Which is another principle of disability justice, the idea of collective liberation. If we leave anyone behind, we haven't achieved our goals. We're allowing continued oppression. And that's why, things where access is built in are so important. I've included the link in the chat for the principles of disability justice. I won't go through all of them, but it's worth looking at. The organization that identified them, Sins Invalids, a wonderful organization to look at. They actually just received a Ford Foundation grant to continue their work, and I can't recommend looking at them enough and listening to what they have to say and do.
So I want to just touch on some of the questions and comments that we have. We have quite a few.
I'm gonna add one thing quick about when I went with Roll on Capitol Hill. And my brain turned off. It's when I went with him to Roll on Capitol Hill, I was like, oh my God, just like him. It's like Albany, but like amplified times 1,000. And it was just wonderful to be there. And one of the teaching moments that I realized was happening, I don't remember who we were speaking to, but I know George Gallo was there, and we were talking about the Air Carrier Act. And we mentioned, I mentioned how I can't go to the bathroom during a flight because I can't get up and walk to go to the bathroom, for local flights, that is. International, no, they have a chair. And if you can, that is an option. But I remember speaking to the assistant, and he was just like, oh my God, I never thought about a person with a disability not being able to get up and go to the bathroom during a flight. And that to me was just like, oh wow, like he really just like learned something, and he now understands it. So like just the power and being able to do that was the point I was trying to make.
But politicians are all human as well, and if they don't have the knowledge, then they don't have the knowledge. How are they going to care about our issues if they don't know what our issues are?
And I mean, that's a great example of advocacy. I mean, I think the the power of storytelling in influencing policy and politicians cannot be overstated. There was a change to consumer-directed personal assistance laws here that allowed parents to serve as attendants for non-dependent children who are over the age of 18. And that only came about because a politician met someone who was having trouble fulfilling their attendant needs and told their story in a meeting, and the politician said, well, we can do something about this. This is easy enough to fix. And it worked its way through the Assembly and the Senate fairly quickly and became part of the law. But without that story, I don't think that happens. And our stories, our experiences are the most potent tools we have for making changes, because that's what they're going to react to.
And I want to give another recent example, like, the straw bill. It was brought to the attention of the disabled community that they were voting on it here in New York. And that's when we voiced our concerns, and the who was a city council member who brought it up asked for a meeting, and he says, I'm sorry, I didn't know. So, I can't, advocate for something that I just don't know about. So, yeah, it's just they're human and they're not going to know everything.
There was one question in the chat. Do you focus on advocating for others or teaching people to advocate for themselves? That'll be less taxing. I think you do both. I mean, part of our work is always going to be organizing others and getting people to show up, and that's wonderful. But I mean, advocacy for everyone should be about teaching and about sharing your experiences. I mean, there are other things involved as well, and I'm not going to certainly underscore things like direct action, but teaching is central to the work we do. I do a lot of advocacy here in New York, and in recent years we've had a lot of attacks on consumer directed, which is why I keep bringing it up. And so, but as those attacks mounted, we went about the Capitol, and folks like Jose and Jessica were there, and educated the legislature, the Senate and the Assembly on the program, to the point where there were people like Gustavo Rivera who stood up and said, I can't vote for my own party's budget because people need this program.
And I'm going to interrupt there and say, advocacy may seem like an intimidating word. You don't have to know the actual politics involved in it. That's why people like Gregg are around. They know the politics, or they have teams that know the politics. United Spinal has a team that knows the politics. We need people to tell their stories on how these changes are affecting you. And those are the biggest things, the stories, that's, you keep saying the stories. That's how change gets done. You bring it to the attention of the politician. Help me. This is how it's hurting me.
I remember even I'm sorry, Greg, when we did the MRT meetings, and we went and we spoke at those. I remember when I testified, I was just like, the stories again are really important, because I remember being up there and I was so angry, and I was just like, look at me, look at my face. Don't identify me with a file number or whatever. This is me. You're affecting this person. So when you're making those decisions, you are hurting me. So I think saying your stories and being that face to those stories definitely make an impact.
Couldn't put it better. And I think that, the politics and those teams Jose mentioned, those are useful in knowing who to put you in front of, but your stories are going to be what carries the day. So someone who uses the MTA sitting and testifying about how changes are going to affect them, or how the lack of access on the MTA affects them, that's going to carry the day. It's not going to be a policy analyst standing in front of them. It's going to be a real person who puts a face to the issue for them.
I will say, now that you're talking about the MTA, hi Jessica Murray, who's here. I testified at many of those, and Pat Foy, he knows my doggy very well because of one of my stories, that I testified there. So it's true. He'll ask for her when I see him.
So in the interest of time, we have 12 questions or comments, and we have about 9 minutes left. So Kathleen says, do you think Congress may try to reenact HR bills that would weaken the ADA?
They
restructure, sorry.
They will bring back ADA notifications. I can guarantee it. The only reason there aren't any yet is because Congress just gathered. But I guarantee you all those bills will come back, and HR 620 was far from the first. It won't be the last, and we will need to oppose everyone that comes along. Some seem to gather more steam than others, and we will try and track that and let people know as that does. But I think you can count on those bills coming back.
So, Jessica?
I did see one question about running for office. There's a
Jessica is going to get to that one now.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. David, he says, how do persons with disabilities become more engaged in running for elected and appointed offices? Voting is important, but having representatives in office seems equally important.
Right. I was just going to say that Nickel has a wonderful program. Nickel is the National Council on Independent Living. And there's a person there named Sarah Blahovic who has done incredible work building up a program to get people, particularly from the disability community, to run for office. And I can't recommend the program enough. I think the more people we get in office, the better. The easier it will be to advocate for our issues. And I think, we did a poll for Crip the Vote. I think a couple times we've done it. We're about to do another. But the single biggest policy initiative that people said we need was to have people in positions of power shaping policy, whether it's in the bureaucracy itself or people running for office. And so if anyone's contemplating it, I urge you to do it. It's a huge commitment. It's a difficult thing, but it's service that will benefit our community. And if anyone has the strength and the power to do that, I applaud you.
Antoinette Davis says, how do we get politicians involved in disability issues before they even are in office? I asked Cynthia Nix a specific question and she looked startled and couldn't answer it. I love AOC, but she has not been very involved in our issues or even commenting on these issues. I went to a meeting she had in my area, but never heard back. What do you suggest?
I will say, it might have been Anthony Weiner, maybe, I don't remember, he was in my area, and you know, vote for me, and I went right up to him and I was like, well, what do you know about my people, and what are you gonna do for my people? And this was like 100 years ago, before I had any manners, which are probably still questionable today. But and I was just like, you know, what are you gonna do? And he looked completely stunned too. So I'm excited to hear this answer today.
I mean, I'm less concerned with what they know than with their ability to listen to the community. I've run into politicians who knew next to nothing, and came in and listened. We had, for a couple of years ago in the state assembly here in New York, we had a person who was named chair of the disability working group for the assembly, or the task force for the assembly, James Skoufis, who's now a state senator, and he came in and said, I don't know a lot about this, but what he did was he listened to us. He listened to advocates. He made a point of reaching out to different groups. He learned to weed out the folks that wanted to silo us all, and the folks that saw us all as one big community. He learned to understand the nuances of policy, and I'll give him credit for that, because he, you know, it's not hard in our society to grow up not knowing disability policy. But if you go into that situation and you make a point of learning it, that's the important thing. And so if you want your, you know, a particular politician to get better on your issues, talk to them, make an appointment with your assembly members, your congress people, your city council members. Talk to them about the issues that are important to you. You are, you know, as a constituent, you have a great deal of influence. You know, they do take constituent meetings seriously, and if more people go in, more people talk to them as constituents, they will listen.
I definitely agree with that. Like, Jessica I'm gonna drive her crazy by saying this, but Richie Torres, he knows a lot about NYCHA. He knows a lot about city politics. He doesn't know a lot about congressional politics, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't know much about, you know, the disability community. But I'm looking forward in meeting him, and maybe I'll be his voice on the disability community and fill him in and help him understand our issues. So that's how we do that. Antoinette, you know, she followed up and said, she provided a letter to AOC, as she is her congressional person, and she never got back to her. What would you suggest she do about that?
I mean, I am a firm believer in hounding politicians. I think don't take being ignored as an answer. If it means going to an event they're at and getting in their face, that is a useful technique. If it means making an appointment after appointment with their constituent services person until you get a satisfactory answer, that is something to do. It can be frustrating, and as I said, it can be exhausting. There are plenty of politicians that don't want to deal with our issues, and they feel it shouldn't be something they have to prioritize. We, you know, arguably saw this in the presidential election last year. We, you know, almost every Democrat put out a detailed policy, and we're, you know, the nominations locked up, and we still haven't seen Joe Biden's policy. The disability community hounded him until he said, okay, here it is, and he issued a detailed policy. So I believe it's paramount that we keep our politicians to task and continue until they respond. But again, it's not easy, but get other people to help. You know, organizing is a tool we have. We have a community. We will never have the money of something like the American Healthcare Association, which is the nursing home lobby. But we have people who have survived nursing homes, and we have people who have avoided going into nursing homes, who can tell you why their life in the community is important. And so this is something we have at our disposal. We'll never be able to outspend organizations like SCIU,
AAPD.
Well,
he's there us, so.
Right. I mean, but we'll never be, even AAPD doesn't have the money to outspend SEIU or something. I mean,
they have dedicated offices and teams at Washington, D.C. to make sure that their voices are heard.
Exactly.
They pump millions into political campaigns. So yeah, no, I completely understand. We're just about out of time. Any last thoughts?
Oh, before I forget, because I'm seeing now. There are a couple other questions, so in case anybody else wants to contact you directly, can you give them your email address?
Yep. I'm typing it in response to the question right now.
Can you put it in the chat as well for those who?
Sure.
And I apologize to everyone for not getting to your questions. We ran out of time. I want to just give Gregg last thoughts. And I also just want to say we do need to get involved because this year is a super important year, just like Kathleen said, for local politics, mayor, comptroller, public advocate, and city council. So.
I mean, I saw Joe Rappaport on earlier, and I think something he'd want me to say. Every year is an election year, and it's never a bad time to advocate to people on the issues that are important to you. We have, as you said, there are local elections coming up in the next year. There are midterms coming up in 2 years, and another presidential election in 4 years, and all of those are going to affect people's lives. Every single one of those will affect your life in some way. I mean, one of the things that was great about Crip the Vote for me has been seeing the range of issues that affect people's lives, and the realization that many have come to that every issue is a disability policy issue, and whether it's something as simple as snow removal or defense spending or immigration reform, these are all disability policy issues, and we need to speak up or someone else will.
All right. Again, I want to apologize for those who we didn't get to your questions. And I would like to thank Gregg, thank Mary, thank Jessica, thank everyone that attended. Happy New Year, and hopefully I'll see you guys on the next one.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Mary.